The Beautiful England calendar for 2023 features 12 scenic locations from various parts of, well, England. And we have given ourselves the challenge of making bike trips out to each of these locations during the month that they feature in the calendar and doing our best to avoid motorways as much as possible along the way. You can click here for the link to January's trip down to St Thomas Becket Church in Kent, but for this month, we're going to be travelling to Bamford Edge in the Peak District. Bamford Edge is not a location that you can just pull up alongside of and take a photo next to. It's at the top of a hill along a walking route, so we will have to look for some sort of secure parking where we can leave the bikes and disappear for about an hour or so. As I said, this is in the Peak District, and you may not have heard this, but apparently the Peak District has a few good roads for motorcycling. So it seems like a bit of a waste of a trip to go all the way up there just to visit Bamford Edge and back. Which brings us to this book, Bikers Britain. As it happens, part 3 of the 4-part Peak District route happens to go directly past Bamford Edge and also includes a trip through Snakes Pass and Winnets Pass. The route described in the book does start and end in Glossop. As we are approaching from the south, we are going to start and end our route somewhere along the A6 in Rowsley. According to Google Maps, the route in the book and the extra distance to and from our house near Hinckley is going to be around 180 miles, meaning that we should only need to stop for fuel once while we're out there. Unfortunately, according to the government website, my 2004 Kawasaki Vulcan 800 is not compatible with E10 unleaded, which is now the norm in the UK, so we may have to make some adjustments to the route so we can find somewhere that serves E5. Using an app called Petrol Prices, we found a petrol station in Matlock that serves E5 unleaded. So we will stop here on the way up and on the way back, as there seems to be little to no petrol stations along the route which we can guarantee serve E5 unleaded. From Matlock, we will follow the route as described up through Bakewell, where we may stop to get a little bit of tea and cake, before heading up to Castleton to climb Winnets Pass. From there, we're going to head up to Glossop, where we can get some lunch and fuel us up to tackle Snakes Pass and then climb a great big hill up to Bamford Edge itself. From there, it's back down to the A6, then to Matlock to fuel up before heading home. Easy. After some research on walking routes, we found that there is a paid car park on the edge of Ladybower Reservoir, which apparently is about a 30-minute walk away from Bamford Edge. There are other free spots available which are apparently a bit of a shorter walk from the edge itself. However, after having a look on Google Maps, these appear to be little more than just laybys on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, and we just didn't feel comfortable leaving the bikes there for longer periods of time where there will likely be no one else around. Due to various circumstances, we ended up being able to make this trip on Monday the 13th of Feb. It was a fairly last minute decision, but we didn't think we'd get such a good weather forecast for the rest of the month, and we assumed that a Monday would make for quieter roads and cafes.
We set off at around 9:30 am beneath skies that were not quite as blue as we had hoped. We crossed the Swarkstone Bridge, which is also a huge causeway on our way to our first fuel stop in Matlock. Just outside of Matlock, Ben realised that by setting the sat-nav to the petrol station in Matlock, it would bring us through the town of Matlock, rather than the other town of Matlock Bath, which is a popular bike destination and somewhere we had visited at a much warmer time of the year in 2021. My friends and I made the same mistake a few years ago when we didn't know that there were two separate towns. We arrived in Matlock and wondered why this sleepy and compact town is considered such a noteworthy biker destination.
We filled up and headed to our first proper stop in Bakewell. The sun was starting to peek through the clouds and the temperature was starting to rise, but so was the number of cars on the road and the number of roadworks. While queuing to get into Bakewell, we noted how it seemed too busy to be a Monday, with strong Saturday vibes being given off by the amount of people around. Still, we managed to squeeze into a parking spot directly outside the front door to the old original Bakewell pudding shop and went inside for a quick bit of cake and a coffee. Inside, we learnt that some parts of the country were on half term this week, which explained the number of families out and about.
After enjoying some cake, we headed back out into the glorious sunshine and rode north towards Speedwell Caverns. Here you can take a trip on a boat to an underground lake, which we didn't have time to do today, but will certainly return to in the future. Quick note here that tickets are £20 each on the door, but they are £18.50 if you book online, and apparently the whole thing takes about an hour. Speedwell Caverns also sits at the foot of Winnett's Pass. An accurate description of Winnett's Pass would be a short, steep road between two hills, but I'll just let the footage elaborate on that further. The pay and display car park at the caverns is also the start point for some short walks along the pass, which I imagine offer some fantastic views of the area.
We climb through the pass and on towards Glossop, passing by a rare flock of paragliders in their natural habitat. The road to Glossop includes some less interesting roads, but the town itself does mark the starting point, or end point if you're coming the other way, of Snake Pass.
We stopped at the Glossop cafeteria for some lunch, which from our research seems to be almost famous with bikers. Unfortunately though, our visit ended up taking a lot longer than expected as they were very much understaffed that day. Still, we had a jacket potato and a toastie with 2 coffees for less than £11, which these days is quite a rarity.
With our bodies fueled up on potato and coffee, we headed out onto the famous Snake Pass. Once again, I'll let the footage do most of the talking rather than have me describe every part of it. It's a winding mountain road that takes you all the way up and then all the way down again. It really is an excellent road offering amazing views with some exciting corners, and if you're being sensible, then the biggest threat is arguably people getting out of their cars as you pass. We were somewhat unlucky on the way down though, as we encountered several roadworks with temporary traffic lights. We assume that this is due to the approaching end of the tax year, so councils are spending money to justify their budgets for next year. Or maybe it's vital work that will save lives. Who knows?
As we swooped round a corner, our ultimate destination appeared from behind the trees, Bamford Edge. We crossed the viaduct and pulled up into the car park, which has a very steep entrance. There is no wording to suggest that bikes can park for free, and parking costs a flat £3 but lasts for 24 hours. We bought 1 ticket and parked both of our bikes in one bay. There are public toilets here though, which are clean and free to use.
What we couldn't find was the walking route we had read about and seen parts of on YouTube. There is a map showing many walking routes but none leading up to Bamford Edge. Being the smart one in our relationship, Frey downloaded an OS map for the area and looked at the footpaths, finding one that took us to the top.
It was a steep climb and the signs stopped along the route. The hike we had hoped would take 30 minutes took closer to an hour, but we managed to get there long enough to take photos before the sun set. This was a happy coincidence as the calendar picture was also taken at sunset, just clearly later in the year when the sun was in a much more photogenic spot.
And here is the picture from the calendar. And here is the closest we could get to matching it with my phone. I realise now that we didn't quite line up the grass on the dam with this angled rock, but I'm not climbing back up there anytime soon just for a quick photo. By the time we got back to the bikes, it was completely dark, so we donned our high-vis vests and headed back to Matlock for fuel. The twisty, unlit roads of the Peak District are much less enjoyable at night, and our visors had accumulated what we assumed to be general filth from the winter roads along the way, making the headlights of oncoming traffic fuzzy blurs, so we had a very cold, slow ride back with our visors up. After fueling up, we agreed it would be safer to take bigger roads home as they would be more likely to be lit. However, this did mean that we got to ride through Matlock Bath after all, only it was at night and there were no other bikes around. So that was February's ride out, and there's not really anything more that can be said about the Peak District that hasn't been said already. We had to miss so many things to see and do, not to mention countless other highly recommended biking routes, but we really did want to keep this just down to one day. We got incredibly lucky with the weather, though the cold on the way back did move past the point of being painful and just unrelenting numbness, especially on the fingertips. Bamford Edge is also an excellent destination, other than the minor confusion with the walking routes that we found. It offers amazing views of the surrounding area, but so do many places in the Peak District. But this one does include a reservoir, a dam with those big plug hole things in it, and a viaduct all in one view. Looking forward to next month, March. Hopefully it's going to keep getting warmer. We're heading a little bit further up north to Whitby Castle. No, we're not. Up to Whitby Abbey, which is apparently the visual inspiration for Dracula's castle. And it also means riding over the North York Moors, which I've been looking forward to for years after driving over them in a car. Rumour has it that Whitby also serves the best fish and chips in the world, so we may have to put that to the test while we're up there. Thank you for watching, and see you next month.